Hi, it's Jessi. I'm here with my January and February wrap-up for 2021. I had recorded my January wrap-up a couple weeks ago, but didn't end up getting it out in February. February was a bad month for me. So I didn't end up getting it out, which is totally fine because I barely read in February, so I don't even have that much to add. But right now I'm going to cut to what I watched, what I recorded for the January wrap-up, and then come back and we can talk about February. So officially, I still haven't decided how I'm going to do my wrap-ups this year. I had thought through several different possibilities, but then I don't know, seeing everybody's January wrap-ups kind of make me want to do one. In the month of January, I either DNF'd or finished reading 18 books. Of those 18, 3 of them were DNFs. I've kind of decided this year, basically, if I get to the end of the month, I look at all the books I'm still reading that I'm bringing over, and if I've been reading it for most of the month or haven't picked it up in a week, I'm just gonna DNF it. I'm not gonna bother because I don't know, I don't want to be dragging too many books through the whole year like I did last year. The exceptions to this, of course, will be whatever Wheel of Time book I'm reading with my partner, anything I'm buddy reading, and when I'm reading something in German, because that's going to take a while. So those would be the exceptions, but this year I've kind of decided to DNF it. But let's get to the stats. Of the 18 books that I read in January, 11 of them were through audiobook, or at least partially through audiobook. 7 of them were at least partially through ebook, and 4 of them were at least partially physical. I am recording now if I read things in multiple formats so that I can kind of keep track of that, because sometimes I'll have a physical book that I'll also read an audiobook to kind of get a more immersive experience, or I'll have a book that I have as ebook when I can't have headphones in, but also audiobook to listen to, that kind of thing. Audiobook is really going to be a big one, so I'm trying to decide, and you guys can let me know, would you rather I started tracking time listened rather than just pages read because you think there are different things and I should treat them as differently, or is it okay for me to just clump it all together in pages? Because I read a lot of audiobooks, so maybe those should be tracked differently. Those books that then of the 18 books I read, 2 of them I classified as middle grade, 11 of them as YA, or 11 of them as young adult, which is a lot, 4 as adult, and 1 that I didn't classify because it was nonfiction. And I don't really think nonfiction falls nicely into an age range. I stopped tracking gender of authors this year because it's not something I think I need to improve on at all, so I don't think it's a useful thing for me to track. I will say, just glancing at the names that I had, it's overwhelmingly women. With about equal representation from men and non-binary folk. So that's great. Honestly, I wouldn't mind getting the non-binary wedge a little bit higher, but I'm pretty okay with what I've got. The one thing I started tracking instead is the racial makeup of the authors that I read, because I didn't make a 2021 goals video, but I had goals in mind, and one of them was to read more racially diversely. And January showed me why I need to consciously do this, because my January breakdown, 14 white authors, 3 black authors, and 1 author of Asian descent. And that to me is absolutely shameful. So I'm gonna actually make a conscious effort. February, my reading kind of got totally screwed up because of The Way of Kings. And my February reading in general is gonna be really low, so I don't know how useful that will be. But going forward, I'm basically going to try to make a very conscious effort that for every 2 white authors I read a BIPOC author. That's still a really, really low ratio, 33% is not enough, but it's a starting point to use as a goal, and then I can go from there. So let me know down below recommendations for books by BIPOC authors that you think I would enjoy. One thing I'm struggling with is accessibility of these through my library. Trying to find an Asian-inspired fantasy written by somebody of Asian descent that my library had available was really difficult. So I am a little bit limited, but just let me know if there's a fantasy, especially a queer fantasy, written by a BIPOC author that you would recommend to me. Please leave recommendations below, because I do want to continue to diversify what I read. So moving on then to numbers. So I was good, I did track not just like how many pages total in a book, but like when I DNF'd books, I tracked how many of the pages in the book I had finished. So total in January, I read 4,271 total pages. Just the books that I finished, however, had an average page count of 263 pages that I read total. I did read a large portion of novellas in January, so reasonable for me to have like a pretty high like book count, but low average pages per book. I also tracked the number of pages I read per day by like each book. I divided the number of days I read it by the number of pages in it, reverse that, whatever. And on average, I read about 109 pages per day, which is decent. It seems low for some reason. The number feels low, but I don't think it actually is. I think that's a pretty decent pages per day number. And then finally, I'm sure the thing everybody cares about the most, my average rating in the month of January was 4.09 out of 5. So, wow, it's been a good reading month, huh? Okay, so let me go through those book by book. The 3 that I DNF'd, I'm not going to talk about them much, but that was Reverie by Ryan LaSala, Kill the Farm Boy by Delia Dawson and Kevin Hearn, and Darkfire by Crystal Acey. I'll actually have my Last Dragon Chronicles review coming relatively soon because I think I'm giving up on that series. It's just a lot of books that I have to read on ebook, and it just takes me too long to get through them. So those 3 are the 3 books I DNF'd this month. The other book that I didn't give a rating to was the nonfiction that I read this year, which was the nonfiction that I read this month, which was The Notorious RBG by Erin Carmon and Shauna Nitschnick. I don't rate nonfictions unless it's like fantastic, and then I'll just like throw a 5-star in Storygraph because it deserves it. But I feel weird rating nonfiction because like either I'm rating the like just the writing style, like did I like the way the information was conveyed, because I'm not gonna rate the information as long as it's accurate. I guess if somebody handed me a nonfiction book that was like offensive, I might throw a 1 star for similar reasons, but like I don't feel the need to rate that. Notorious RBG was fine. If I was gonna give it a number, I'd say it's about a 3. I didn't like the style of it, and I feel like it focused on parts of RBG's life that I didn't care about as much, but it was cute. It was pretty good. It was a pretty okay overview of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life. And then going down the list of books, I'm gonna talk about them in the order I read them in because that's how my spreadsheet is arranged. Plus it's easier because I don't use whole stars anymore. It's easier to just give you the like exact rating that they have. Most of these were ones that I read for Wadathon, so you can check out my vlogs for a little more in-depth thoughts on the books if you're interested. So outside of everything I've talked about, the first one that I finished in January was Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fanny Flagg. I gave this a 4.4 stars when I finished it, but honestly I might drop that a little bit because the more I thought about it after finishing it, the more it felt very white feminist to me. This is about, there's a woman that's going to a nursing home to go visit her mother-in-law, and she ends up, instead of talking with her mother-in-law, talking with this other older woman who tells her stories about this small town of Whistle Stop, Alabama, where she grew up. And it's largely about specifically the cafe in Whistle Stop that was run by these 2 women, who are never labeled, but at the very least by women. And I think it had a lot of really interesting and progressive ideas as far as like sexuality goes, but when it came to the racial discussions it was trying to have, it fell a little bit short. But I did enjoy it. I thought it was a fun book to read. There were some things that I really enjoyed and I took away from it. So I don't think it's a bad book. It's just, it was written in the 80s and it sounds like it was written in the 80s. It didn't age well, and that's fine. The next book that I finished in January was Night Shine by Tessa Gratton. You can see all of the beautiful tabs I gave that because I love this book. I gave it a 4.58 out of 5 stars. It's not as good as Tessa Gratton's other book that I read. I liked Strange Grace a lot more than Nightshine, but Nightshine was still really good. It explores, I mean, largely it's an exploration of gender. It's exploring what it means to be who you are and how you don't change. You as a person are still you, even if you change the words you use to describe yourself. And it just had a lot of really, really good messages along those lines. Where I struggled a little bit was its exploration of like abuse in relationships. I think on one half of the book really had an interesting discussion about how to overcome abuse, but on the other hand, romanticized abuse. So that really kind of sat uneasy with me. And then I didn't like the resolution to this, but it turns out she's writing a sequel. So with that in mind, maybe the sequel would make my thoughts change on this one a little bit, depending on how things work out in that one. After that, I read There Will Come a Darkness by Katie Rose Poole and gave it 3.4 stars. This was fine. It wasn't bad, it wasn't great, it was cute. It took a while for me to get interested into the characters, which is fine. And there was just a lot going on. I didn't talk about Nightshine is... I didn't tell you what this was about because I don't know how to tell you what it's about. Nightshine is about the prince of a kingdom goes missing and his best friend goes looking for him. And oh, that sounds so lame though. It's basically, yeah, no, that's all I can say. I can't even tell you the main character's name because that feels like a spoiler. There Will Come a Darkness is about this prophecy that says the world is gonna end and there's people that can stop it from happening and there's these cool magics, but I don't know. It's been like a month since I read it and I can't remember it, and that's not a glowing review for it, but yeah, I don't have a lot to say about There Will Come a Darkness. I thought it was fine, but clearly it's not memorable in any way, so it is a really interesting, it's got a lot of interesting gray morality going on though, if that's something you're interested in, like your hero's not maybe being as heroic as one would want. It's pretty good for that. After that, I read The Exiled Seven by Blake Renworth. This is a reverse Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's the seven dwarfs get exiled by their hometown and end up living with a young mysterious woman that lives out in the middle of the woods. It's cute. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4.7 stars out of 5. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was super cute. I loved the characters. The Snow White analogous character is amazing. All of the dwarfs have their own personalities, are really unique. It's got a really, really witty vocal tone, writing style. It's very witty and humorous. I found myself laughing out loud while reading this, but also almost crying, which is apparently a thing I do to myself now. So I really enjoyed that. What I don't enjoy is that there's no resolution in this book. It just kind of ends rather abruptly, which would be fine because there's supposed to be a sequel, but it's been like 10 years and there's no sign of a sequel coming. So if this ever gets a sequel, I really recommend it. Until it does though, I don't know. Maybe not. Then I read Lakewood by Megan Giddings. This is a book about a young black woman who needs money, and she joins up for a research study and then things get weird. I gave it 3.68 stars, and that honestly feels a little high, but I think it deserves it for the kind of conversations it was trying to have. But I didn't feel particularly attached to the characters. I didn't like the resolution to the story. It didn't feel like it was finished. So I had issues with it that just kind of were hard to overcome, but I think it's a really good book and I think a lot of people should read it. I think the horror and the creepy and the weird were really well done. The story itself, the plot, didn't quite grip me. So it was a lot of really cool atmospheric elements, but not so much the story it was in didn't really speak to me the way I would have liked it to. After that, I read the first 5 books from Shauna Maguire's Wayward Children series. The first 5 books from Shauna Maguire's Wayward Children series. That's in order: Every Heart a Doorway, which I gave 4.25 stars, Down Among the Sticks and Bones, which I gave 4.58 stars, Beneath the Sugar Sky, which got 4.2 stars, In an Absent Dream, which got 4.45 stars, and Come Tumbling Down, which got 4.7 stars. I enjoyed reading those. I thought they were cute. There were things I liked about some that I didn't like as much about others, but as a series, it's really cute and you should read them. So this series is about Ellie West's Home for Wayward Children, which is a home in which children that have fallen down rabbit holes or walked through doorways and come back and don't want to be in the real world, they can go and get help. They can be among other people that wish they could just find their way back to their fairylands. And every other book is about that. So the first, third, and fifth book are about that school and the students at that school. And the second and the fourth book are books about children finding their doorways. And I think the ones about children finding their doorways are a lot stronger. I think Shauna Maguire does beautiful world building in those ones. But those two in particular felt too short. Maybe it's because the story kind of ends there, although not really, because you know where these children end up. But the stories feel very abrupt and not long enough. The odd ones, the ones that are mostly in our world, were not, I didn't enjoy them as much, except for the third one. I really enjoyed the third one, but that had to do with specifics about that specific book. But I don't enjoy those ones quite as much just because I don't care as much about the real world aspects of it, which is a little frustrating because that's the one that has the like through plot. But I really recommend these. I think they're wonderful and I think they're worth trying, but just know that it's not enough. I want more. Next on the list, I read Irusha and the End of Time by Roshani Chatsky. That's not how you say that. Roshani Chokshi. Anyway, Arusha and the End of Time. This is the first of the Arusha series, which is actually called the something series. But this is a Rick Riordan. Wow, okay, I'm struggling. This is a Rick Riordan Presents novel, so it's basically Percy Jackson, but with Indian mythology instead of Greek mythology, and honestly, I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed The Lightning Thief when I read it as a kid. I think it's really cute. It's a cute kid's book. I ended up giving it 3.85 stars, which is really good for a middle grade for me. I struggle when I can't attach myself to the protagonist, and honestly, Chachki did a great job of making it so I could sympathize with this 12-year-old. I was not expecting to care as much as I did, and she did a great job, and I cared and I enjoyed it, and I think I might finish the series. I don't know, I haven't decided if I want to read the rest of that series yet, but I do really want to read some Indian mythologies. There's a few different Indian epic poems that they mention in that one, and I think I'm gonna start with the Mahabharata. But if you have a recommendation for a specific translation, please leave it below because apparently there's a million of them. So that's that. Next, I read My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyakan Braithwaite. I think I said that right. And I didn't love it. I gave it 3.03 stars, so like middle of the road. It's not bad, it's not good. I read this with Leslie from Stuck on Arrakis. Her book club read it in February, theoretically. We're kind of ahead of schedule, we're working on it. And honestly, everybody sharing their thoughts has pulled me in every different direction, but ultimately I didn't like it because I can't even talk about it. So this book is about this two sisters. The younger sister has a habit of killing her boyfriends, and the older sister has a habit of helping her get away with it. And that's kind of where the synopsis gives a way more information on this, and for a book that's only like 200 pages, it gives you way too much information. I can't really talk about what specifically bothered me about this because it really relies on spoiling a lot of information. One of the things, though, I can solidly say I didn't like was that I wanted it to be chronological, and it starts way late in the events that are happening. Like, if it had started with the first murder, which theoretically was in self-defense. Like if it started with that one and then we could have slowly seen the older sister, Corday, starting to doubt her sister, I would have enjoyed that a lot more than starting at the end of this cycle where she's already doubting it and wondering if she should turn her sister in, and then getting flashbacks to everything else. I think I would have liked that as a journey a lot more personally. And then there's just some other stuff that bugged me, but it's very late in the book that it comes up, so I can't really talk about it. But I also, like, everybody in the book club has felt very different things about this book, but for citing the same kind of stuff. So I would recommend trying this one. It's not a long book. It's like 200 pages, not even. Yeah, it's like 220 pages. It's not gonna take you long. I read it in an afternoon. It's worth trying, and if you end up liking it, then you end up liking it. And if you don't end up liking it, it's not the end of the world. It's really short. Try it. Next, I read Pet by Kweke Emezi. This is another one I really wanted to like and just didn't. I gave it 3.15 stars. So Pet is about a world in which monsters have been eliminated, and monsters in this world means like bad things, racism, abuse, those kind of things have been erased from the world by the angels, which are like the people that took it upon themselves to save the world from all of these monsters. And then one day, I hate with novellas because I know very well that the synopsis, if you Google it, gives you more information than I just gave you. But I really feel like you shouldn't, because I spent like the first third of this book waiting for stuff to happen that I knew was going to happen. So I'm gonna leave it there. It's this world where supposedly all the monsters are gone, but maybe they aren't. I think my first complaint with it is just that, like, I knew what was going to happen because of the synopsis, and it took so long for that to happen. So the beginning of it was just it dragged. It went slowly and it kind of dragged. So that was part of my problem with it. And just the writing style didn't appeal to me. I mean, it's a 208 pages, and it took me 5 days to read this. Like, it just didn't grip me, and I didn't end up liking the message that it sent at the end. It was a very wishy-washy message, in my opinion. You know, very much a don't become the monsters you see in the night kind of message. And I don't like books that present this idea or this concept and then don't solve the concept. Or not even that. Like, Pet is entirely about, like, if you have to do bad things to overcome the bad things, are you a good person still? And it never answers the question, really. And that bugged me. I just felt like I didn't get a resolution to the actual question that was posed. And finally, the last book that I read in January was The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman. This is short, very short. It's full of beautiful, gorgeous illustrations. It's not the prettiest of illustrations, but I love it anyway. And this is kind of a slightly darker version, but it's a bit of a mashup between Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. And that's really all you need to know, because I mean, if Neil Gaiman telling a dark fairy tale mashup between Snow White and Cinderella, of Snow White and Sleeping Beauty isn't enough to interest you, then I don't know what will, because I mean, it's beautiful. You can read it in an afternoon, and it's great. Oh, and I gave it 4.23 stars. Honestly, there's another one I feel like I could have had a lot more of. I don't think it needed to be a full novel, but it definitely could have been like more than 70 pages, and I would have enjoyed it. Because this isn't, I have it kind of classified as a graphic novel, but it isn't really a graphic novel. Like, it's full pages of text. So I feel like I could have gotten more out of this, but it was good. And that is everything that I read in January. It was an overall highly rated January, but nothing super exciting. I don't know that I read any new favorites this month, but I read a lot of things I enjoyed, and so that's good. Okay, so for my February stats, I only finished 5 I only finished 5 books in February, and then I DNF'd one at the end of the month. These come out to an average page count between those 5 books that I finished, though, of 463 pages. The total pages that I read in February, approximately, was about 2,427 pages, and based on when I was reading, it's about... that can't be right. Okay, well that's interestingly different. Sorry, so like the way I calculate my pages per day is that like when I finish a book, I like go through and find out how many pages I read per day on average for that. And when I average that out, it comes out to an average of 41 pages per day. But if I take like the total number of pages and divide it by the number of days in February, it comes out to about 87 pages per day, but that's definitely not right because like some of the books I read, I was reading already in January. It's still fun though. I don't know if anybody cares. Anyway, I read a total of approximately 2,427 pages in all the books that I read or DNF'd in February, and an average of 41 pages per day. And for the books that I read, 2 of them I did not rate, but my average rating for the month was 3.96 out of 5 stars, so another pretty good month. Talking about the format that I read books in, so a lot of these were doubled up. That's not true. One of them was tripled up. But I read 4 books at least partially from audiobook, 2 books at least partially ebook, and 2 books at least partially physically. The age range, 5 of the 6 books were adult, with 1 middle grade book. Actually, I probably feel like one of those adult books could have been classified as YA. Maybe. And for the racial breakdown of the authors of the books, I read 5 of those books were by white authors and 1 by a black author. So still not great there. Better than February, or better than January just because of the ratio, but I am starting to implement my rule for doing, to intentionally increase diversity of my shelf. So then getting into the books that I read in February, going in the order that I started reading them in. The first book was Way of Kings. This is the reason February was such a short reading month for me, why I read so few books, was because I read The Way of Kings. Coming out throughout March will be my reading diary videos for The Way of Kings, so I won't talk too much about what it is or what I think about it. This is Brandon Sanderson's magnum opus of sorts, which is the Stormlight Archive. And I don't know how to explain what this book is about. It's about a war and the people being impacted by the war. Yeah. Anyway, but if you're interested in my full thoughts on this, check out the reading diaries as they come out. Those will be full spoilers, spoiler-free thoughts. I think it was pretty good. Now, I gave it a 4.228 out of 5 stars, so it got a really good rating, but I don't know if I like it. It was a very, very, very slow book. Sanderson has a weird pacing thing where like he builds and builds and builds and builds, and then eventually kind of all collapses in on itself in a good way. And it does do that in this, but the climax of it didn't feel good enough to make up for the slow building tension. Now the rest of the series might do that, but for just this first book, I'm a little iffy on it, but I'm optimistic that the rest of the series will make that make more sense. Next on the books, I started at the end of January, I started rereading the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. This is because I was supposed to do a live show about it, and it kind of didn't happen because life sometimes does things. But this was a reread for me, so this is the other book I didn't actually rate because I read it like 2 months ago, so I didn't really feel like it was necessary to rate it again. If you're interested, my rating the original time was 4.75 out of 5 stars. So the 5th season is the first in the Broken Earth trilogy. I have a review that recently came out for that, so go ahead and check that one out. But it is about this world in which periodically the world ends. There's like massive environmental collapse, and society and civilization kind of scatters and then has to reform. And this book takes place during one of these. They're called the 5th season, so it's taking place during a season. And we follow 3 different characters in the first book. And I really like it. I think it's fantastic. I don't know. I don't really have a lot to say about it because it was a reread. I already have my review about it, so check that out if you're interested. The next book that I read for February was A Deborah Named Al by Wendy Isdell. This was actually for my class coursework. We had to read for a class a book that could about the subject we teach that we could like potentially use in our classroom. So this is a book. It's kind of a Wizard of Oz portal fantasy book where this young girl named Sophie, I don't remember the girl's name, is transplanted to the world of mathematics, where mathematical concepts and the periodic elements, I don't know why there's that very small amount of chemistry in this book, but mostly the mathematical concepts are like personified in the world, and it was okay. I ended up giving it a 2.83 out of 5 stars. It worked for the assignment, so I'm fine having read it, but like if I was doing it for anything else, I would have been really disappointed. It didn't, part of it was that like it didn't quite work for what I needed. Like I could write my report and whatever on it for class, but like it wouldn't have actually worked in my classroom. I would never give this to a student to read because it just has this mindset of like, if you're bad at math, you're bad at math, and only magic can save you. And that bugged me. But it just wasn't good. It was like they took the barest idea of what like the Wizard of Oz is, took out all of the adventure and fun things, and threw in a handful of math. It wasn't great. After that, I read A Memory Called Empire by Arcady Martin. This was Riddima's February book club pick. I would have never picked this up if not for that. So I don't feel too bad about the fact that I didn't love it. So I gave it a 3.93. A Memory Called Empire is about, it's a sci-fi about an ambassador from this like small colony coming to live in the like mainland, and her job is to kind of bridge the gap between them, basically like get advantages from being part of an empire without being completely subsumed by the empire. It's kind of the best I can give you. And there's some interesting stuff there with like the whole A Memory Called Empire is that she has this implant that's the memories of the previous ambassador are supposed to help her, but that's not working quite right. And it's just not something, it's not a book for me. I think objectively it was a really, really good book. I just don't love political plot lines, and I don't love heavy sci-fi, and this was both of those. So it was a lot of like technology stuff, which I actually got used to and started really enjoying. I think I can deal with sci-fi when I can kind of just turn my brain off and say it's fantasy. That's basically what I did for this, and it worked out pretty okay. But it's all politics, like literally all politics. So that was really hard for me to really get into. So I ended up like loving the characters. I thought the world was fantastic. I really enjoyed the relationships and the growth characters went through and the way they interacted with each other. Martine does amazing world building in regards to like how language shows the culture of a place and things like that. So all of that was fantastic, and I just didn't care at all about the plot. So I think it's an objectively good book that if political plots and sci-fi are things you like, you will love this book. It just really wasn't for me. Then after that, I reread This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Al El Motar. This was for Leslie's book club from Stuck on Arrakis. She does a little book club, and we kind of finished the February book way early. That was My Sister the Serial Killer, which was in my January wrap-up. So we decided to pick a novella to read together as like something to do at the end of the month. And I love this book. I love it even more having read it on audiobook. Like, I don't think if I had read it on audiobook the first time I would have appreciated it because I would have lost a lot of the details. But reading it on audiobook, already knowing what happens, I just love it. It's just this beautiful story about sapphic yearning, and I just was super into it. If you don't know what this book is about, I kind of don't want to say much more than I already have. but it's about these two agents on opposite sides of this conflict that spans time, literally spans time. They like move up and down, backwards and forwards in time to like change things to win the war. And these two agents on opposite sides start this correspondence, and it's just so beautifully written. It's just wonderful. The actual rating this gets is a 4.78 out of 5 because getting 5 stars is kind of impossible in my system. Anyway, the only other thing to mention, and I have it at the end for some reason, sometimes I don't know why I do things, is that I DNF Warbreaker. It's up there. I'm not going to go grab it because it's kind of a pain. Basically, it just kind of got put aside when I started reading Way of Kings, and I just never circled back to it. It's a reread, and I kind of don't want to read it now because a friend of mine has just finished it, and he said after Way of Kings it's not very good. Or not that it's not very good, but it's like disappointing after Way of Kings, and I kind of don't want to give myself that memory of Warbreaker because I love Warbreaker and I want to keep loving Warbreaker. So I just kind of decided I would put it aside. I've read it before. I don't need to reread it, at least not right now. So, and that is it for my January and February wrap up. Go ahead and let me know below what you have read so far this year. If there's anything you absolutely love in it, anything you absolutely love that you've read so far, anything you absolutely hate, let me know. And I will see you next time.